Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1663 AN. Today's date is September 13th, 2018, and the title of the episode is The Economic Crisis is on Schedule. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, let's talk about this schedule of this economic collapse, because the central bankers, before Trump came into office, they had a schedule. They knew when the collapse was going to be. They knew how it was going to happen. They knew they were going to have an event. All they needed is all the pieces in place. Well, that didn't happen. So what do you do with the schedule? Because we need to understand and remember that the economy was only designed to last a certain period of time, and then it collapses. Because as you continually create currency and put the country into debt and people into debt, and you lose jobs, and they move manufacturing out of the United States, and you lose jobs, and the federal tax receipts decline over time, it's just a matter of time before the economy implodes by itself. You don't even have to do anything. And the central bankers know this. They know that their system is flawed. And when I say flawed, I don't mean, there's problems and they don't know what to do with it. It's flawed in a way where it doesn't benefit the people. It benefits the central bank, and it only benefits the central bank up to a certain point of time, and they need to restart it. This is what we're seeing right now. The flaw is they continually create currency out of thin air. They loan it to governments. There's interest attached to it. And since that first printing of that first dollar, you owe more on that dollar than exists out in the real world because they haven't created it yet. So they create $1, and now the government owes them, let's say, $1 plus 10 cents interest. Where do you get the 10 cents? It doesn't exist. So what do you have to do? You have to borrow more. Can you ever pay down the debt? No, it's completely impossible. You can't do it. This is the flaw. And as time goes on, what happens? The debt gets larger. The jobs decrease. People are put into debt. They don't have cash on hand. Their entire lives revolve around debt. That's it. That's what we're seeing today. And yes, those people who started in the beginning of the system, they're going to make out a lot better than those people coming into the system in the late 90s, 2000s, and where we are today. Actually, people coming in today, it's very, very difficult because you're at the end stage of this system. Those people who were getting jobs in the 70s or even the early 80s, that is the beginning stages of a central bank system. So you have the ability to ride out their system throughout time and prosper from it, while others, well, they lose everything. And as more people come into the central banking system, and what I mean by that is they're born, they grow up, they get a job, and they come in the 90s, and they come in the 2000s. These people have a tougher and tougher time, because think about it. The same dollar loses value over time. So back in the day, in the 70s, you would go and you'd spend, $1, and you'd be able to buy, a lot more things than you can purchase today with the dollar. Actually, you can hardly purchase anything for $1 because the value of that dollar has decreased. So you need more of that dollar to buy the same amount of items. And this is why people are having a difficult time today. And this is why we moved through many, many different stages throughout the 70s when we came off the gold standard onto the petrodollar system. This is why we went through financing a car instead of just buying it using cash. This is why we went to leasing. This is why they extended the time that you can pay it back. This is why they had to bring in subprime people, because over time the system deteriorates and there's no way to keep it going. So you have to use all these different fancy ways of continuing the system as the system breaks down, and it becomes impossible. And what we're seeing right now is the housing market, which has been pumped up once again, it's starting to fall apart. Actually, if we look at Las Vegas right now, their entire real estate market has been pumped up, and prices are up more than 135% from the depths of the crisis in North Las Vegas. Mortgage rates are rising, and the bubble there is going to pop, just like we've seen in many other places. We're going to see it in Phoenix. We're going to see it in LA. We're going to see it in certain cities in Texas. We're going to see it in New York City. We're going to see it in all these different places where they look at the 20 cities. They pumped up the bubbles there, and now they're starting to fall apart. We're seeing cracks everywhere. And when the Fed raises rates once again, guess what? It's just going to get worse. And that's what we're going to see. So the central bank system was always scheduled to come down during a certain period. And now what we're seeing is that their schedule is still moving forward. They don't have that event. So what do? There's not much they can do. They can blame it on maybe Trump. They can try to blame it on someone else. But they're stuck right now. And this is a problem for them. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I wanted to point our attention to the federal government receipts. Now, what we've been seeing over time is that the federal government receipts coming into the government has been declining since the Great Recession. Now, it dipped down quite a bit, like down negative 20% when everyone was getting laid off. And then it was pumped back up. And ever since around 2011, 2012, the government receipts have been falling and falling and falling. At one point, it touched into the negative area. Then it moved up a little bit. Now we're almost back into the negative area once again. And this is why they created FACTA, GATCA, and the rest, because they were looking for these funds everywhere around the world to keep the system moving along. Well, at this point, the number of people that are out of work, the number of people that have gone from a full-time job to a part-time job because they can't find that full-time job, you're not going to have the same tax receipts. And no, this is not because of Trump's tax plan. They've been falling way before that. Go back to 2013, 2014, 2015. Actually, they were in the negative territory in 2015. They pumped up a little bit to like 1%, and now they're back almost to zero. So we can see that has nothing to do with it. What it really has to do with is the economy's breaking down. People don't have jobs. People aren't making the same amount of money. And we're not seeing the taxes being pushed into the government. What else is happening? Well, the debt is continually rising in the government, and the tax receipts are falling. This is not a good sign. What happens when this happens? We have problems. So everything is on schedule right now, but the central bank, they're the ones that are in trouble because they didn't have their event. And we can see, and if we look back in time, we can see back in 2001, there was a dot-com bubble that popped and the markets came down. In 2008, we saw the housing bubble that popped and that came down. We are now in the same central bankers bubble, and that is twice as large as the housing bubble. What does that mean? That means when this system falls, it's going to completely crash. Now, if you compare this to the GDP numbers, and we go back to the housing bubble, well, actually, let's go back to the dot-com bubble, and we look at the growth index. GDP at the time of the dot-com bubble, GDP was around 170 on the growth index. The dot-com bubble was around 190. And then afterwards, we see that the asset prices fell very close to where GDP was. If we look at the housing bubble, which is the asset prices, and we look at the GDP numbers at this point in time were around 225 on the growth index chart. If we look at the housing bubble, at the asset prices, they were at 290 points. So we can see the spread is between 290, which is the asset prices. It was above the GDP numbers, which were 225. Today, we are at 365, which is the asset prices, compared to GDP, which is around 275. It's a much larger spread. And when we look at the housing bubble, the asset prices fell, if we look at the growth chart, all the way down to where the GDP numbers were. So if this asset prices bubble, the central bankers bubble, falls to where the GDP numbers are right now, we would fall all the way down to around 275 from 365, around that area. I mean, this is a huge implosion of the system. And that means the stock market's going to come down. That means the housing market's going to come down. That means all the bubbles are going to come down all at once. Again, this was scheduled. They knew what was going to happen. They knew they only had a certain period of time. They knew that the system couldn't last much longer. Now, we know what Trump is doing. This is part of the strategy. The strategy is to pump up the economy, make it look like it's doing better than it ever has done before. Obama said, listen, you don't have a magic wand to make these numbers go up. Trump said, yes, I do have a magic wand. See how it's working? Think about this for a second. Trump knows how to control the market because guess what? All the presidents before him, the central bank, they were manipulating everything before he even got there. And now he has the magic wand. He has the ability to control pretty much everything. He can make it do whatever he wants. He can make GDP go up to 9%. But what does it really mean? It doesn't mean much. I mean, it sounds great when you hear a statistical number like that, but what does it really mean? It means nothing. Because when you look at the real economy, you can see it has no bearing on 9% GDP. He can make the unemployment go down to 0. But when you still have 120 million people out of work, what does that really mean? But this is what the central bank and others have used for many, many years. He's making the economy look incredible right now to protect what he's doing. How is it protecting him? Well, they can't turn around and say, you just destroyed the economy with your tariffs because the economy is doing fantastically, according to their manipulated numbers. Your tax proposals, that's going to destroy the economy. Well, according to the numbers, the statistical numbers in the stock market, it's doing fantastically. It didn't affect it. He protected himself where they can't say everything that he's done with NAFTA renegotiations, getting rid of TPP, all this stuff, it didn't affect the economy. So he will not be the person who destroyed the economy. Now, in his back pocket, what does he have? He has two narratives. The Fed, I believe Powell's working with Trump, raising rates. We know when you raise the rates, it's going to hurt the housing market, student loan market, the auto industry, the banks interlending. It's going to hurt the buybacks of the stocks that banks and corporations have done over many, many years. And he can blame that right on the Fed, saying, listen, you raised the rates, we know what happened. Or once the Moab is dropped and all this bad news comes out and people start to realize that our country is corrupt and these leaders have done things that you can't believe and the economy comes down. Well, the economy was doing great, but look what happened. These people were corrupt. We found out when we got into office. And it brought the economy down because everyone is losing faith in the system right now. So it's the central bank and it's the bad news. That's what's happening. Now, other countries realize that this is happening. Russia, China, remember, they were set up in the beginning stages of all of this to be the new reserve currency, especially China. The central bank eventually was going to set up shop there. The IMF was going to be in control. We're going to see the SDR. We're not seeing any of that right now. We can see we're being pushed away from that by Trump, Xi Jinping, and Putin. We're not going to be entering that central bank phase. I believe they're working together to get rid of the central bank eventually. One step at a time. You can't do everything at once. Remember, they've been embedded in the system for many, many, many years. And they set up shop in almost the entire world. Yes, Russia has taken control over its central bank. Countries have taken control over their private Western central bank. The United States needs to take control over the private Western central bank and nationalize it and control it and make it a people's economy. But countries understand and they realize that the dollar eventually will no longer exist. And countries now are looking to trade in their national currencies. Russia has been screaming that countries should start to do this. And many countries are doing this because they realize that this system is going to implode very, very soon. And everyone is getting prepared for this. This is why Russia, China, India, and the rest have been either repatriating their gold or purchasing as much gold as they possibly can because it's going to be used as an insurance policy. It's really going to be used to build confidence. Listen, we have the gold. You can be confident in our new system. China has the manufacturing. China has all the exchanges that we have in the United States. They have the Belt and Road. And the reason why they have all this is because over the many years, they were being set up to be the next reserve currency, the next area where everything was going to revolve around it. They even have the petro yuan right now. So we can see how all of this is going to be playing out right now. And this entire system was scheduled to come down. And it was scheduled to come down most likely in 2019 around that time period because they thought they were going to have someone else in office and they thought they were going to have a war, which was going to cover up this entire thing. Well, the schedule still stands. The system cannot go beyond. It's falling apart rapidly, and it's going to fall apart even faster as the Fed raises rates. And if the news comes out that the whole entire system is corrupt, well, the whole system is just going to fall apart. And again, Trump, the Patriots, they won't be blamed because they're not the corrupt individuals. They're not the ones who were doing all these things, spying on different people, selling military secrets and everything like that. So he's in the clear. The Patriots are in the clear. And the schedule is still on schedule because you can't really break it. The system is dying. It's really dead. And they only pumped it up for a certain period of time. And now we're reaching the due date of the schedule where the whole thing is going to fall apart. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.